Let's go. You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
I want you to critique my view on this, which is very similar, right? But critique it. You can steal it for your next book if you want.
Thank you. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, all right. I think it's three things that people want.
Okay.
And I think it's three things that leaders need to provide. And I've always said this.
Okay.
It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I actually didn't even realize the acronym there is AMP until somebody said, yeah, we need to amp it up.
Nice.
But that, I honestly didn't. But it's autonomy, meaning people want to be empowered. They want to be able to make the decisions that they think are correct. Mastery, obviously, they want to be really good at something. They want to feel like, look, I am very skilled in this area. I have something to offer. And then purpose, you come in, you got meaning every day. You walk away and say, I did something. I really had an impact. What am I missing in those three? Anything I'm missing? You think they're complete? You think?
I think they're complete. And let me tell you why I think they are complete. Autonomy is autonomy about how I do it. But if I'm a leader and I give people autonomy, I better have done the pre-work we talked about before, which is agreeing on what great looks like and how we're measuring it, and then give you the freedom in how you accomplish it. So autonomy about how is only successful when we are aligned about what it is great looks like and how it is we're measuring it. We talk about that in the Buy-in Advantage book. The mastery is my opportunity to grow. And I don't grow when you tell me how you would do it. I grow when you ask me questions based on your experience that allow me to develop my muscle of problem solving and how to approach issues and how to engage my team members. Mastery is growth, and growth is something that is absolutely important to all generations. Otherwise, it's just tell me what you want. If you want to tell people what to do, it's great. That makes people's life infinitely easier. Just tell them what to do, and we'll get it done faster. We won't get it done as well, but that's okay. If we just want fast, good enough. The third, purpose. Compelling purpose is really important. Compelling purpose is answering the question, why does it matter? And as a result of the pandemic, a lot more people are saying, is it worth it? Why does this matter what we're doing? How am I making a difference in the world because I'm doing this? And if a company's employees cannot clearly answer to a person why it is that it's worth doing, then we've lost the purpose game right out of the box. Why is my work important? Why is what we are doing collectively important? It is never, ever, compelling purpose is never about making money. It's about making change in the world. A long time ago, Walt Disney said the compelling purpose of Disney is create happiness. Everything he did. How is, we did movies, amusement park, etc. We created characters, but that's the how. The purpose is create happiness. Sam Walton said, our purpose is to put money back into American families' pocketbook. And everything he did in the how lined up with that purpose. For example, Walton didn't start in downtown New York City because the rents would not allow him to put money back into pocketbooks. Walmart recently, 5 years ago, said, you better cut your packaging because it'll reduce transportation costs and allow us to put money back into families' pocketbooks. So everything lines up with Mr. Sam's original compelling purpose that remains to this day. So if leaders have not answered that question as an organization, it starts there. So autonomy and mastery and purpose, I think it's a great framework.
Nice. Thank you. I knew it. By the way, I think you're making me feel bad for what I'm paying in rent right now in New York. I feel you. Now I got to go think about that. One thing that comes to mind, though, I was thinking about this today, just via another situation I was with. I don't think leaders realize how much people are watching, their behaviors, what they do, what they say, particularly in any company. A leader may say something maybe in a meeting, because I'm looking for your view on this. A leader may say something in a meeting that's just off the cuff. And you don't want to be really too watchful of your words because you want to be transparent. But when you're transparent, sometimes you say something, you walk out of the room, you probably would forget it in 30 minutes. However, somebody heard it and they go, we gotta take action on that. That's what Al said. We gotta do X, Y, and Z. And so you walk out of the room, you're going to lunch, and people are scurrying off to create this new set of work streams to solve something you just made a simple comment on.
Right.
I kind of wanted your thought on how to make sure, easy thing to say is, just watch what you say, make sure you're clear on what's your priorities, focus, and what's your point of view versus what we need to get done, blah, blah, blah. How do you stop that unnecessary churn just because a leader, maybe it's a cultural thing, but a leader said something offhand that everybody else is just going to just run off and take action on?
Now, one thing I've learned is that what we say and what we do, if we are sane, and most leaders are very sane, our actions and our words always line up with our beliefs. So I would ask us as leaders just to examine what our beliefs are. For example, earlier this week, I was with a leader who pulled me aside to say, hey, for the last 3 years, this team hasn't done diddly squat. They haven't achieved their potential. They're not winning. So I would ask you, is that attitude going to come through in what that leader says unless they monitor every word and read from a script? That belief is going to come shining through in the words. And I said, I'm really curious to know, is that their fault? Are we trying to assign blame and judgment? Or are we curious in asking them what they think is going well, what they think the potential is, and most importantly, what gets in the way of them being great? And so if the belief is these people are losers, that's going to come through in our words by a side comment that we make. If what we believe is, hey, you know what? We can do a better job of unleashing these people's potential if we did this, this, and this, that will also come through. So I don't think you can work to a script. I don't think you're going to speak perfectly. You're going to speak truthfully, but let's get our beliefs to line up. And let's get beliefs across the team to line up. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we worked with a couple of different clients who were saying, what do we do? How do we respond? And the first thing we did was go through the drama-free problem-solving system to identify what are our beliefs about what is happening. I don't know what's going to happen, but what are our beliefs about what is happening to date? What are our beliefs? And what do we believe will happen in the future? When we can agree on what we think our beliefs are about the future, then we can create a plan that says, here's what we're going to do as a result. And then check in on those beliefs every 30 or 60 days to say, is this really playing out the way we thought? And today, as we face uncertainty over tariffs and government policy and international relations, same situation. Let's align on what our beliefs are, make sure our plan addresses those beliefs, and then keep checking in on the beliefs to say, is that still true?
If I could keep going on for a long time here, because there are several questions I didn't even get to, but I think these are, based on what has been described so far, I got 3 questions that are important to me. The first one is this. When do you throw curiosity out the window and you lay the hammer down?
When we've gone through the process of aligning on what great looks like, the measures, and asking people how they evaluate their performance, and we've done a gap analysis, and we have agreed on a plan to address it, and people don't implement that plan and stuff hasn't changed, it's hammer time. It's hammer time. When there's not time for any decision, when there's a chemical leak, when there's a fire in the building, when the plane is going down, you don't say, hey, passengers, just curious to know, anybody have any thoughts about what we ought to do? There turns out to be a fire in the cargo. Probably not the best thing. But that should happen very few times.
I told you at the beginning, I had 2 questions. We just got through one and we just went down that long path. But my second one that I really wanted to talk to you about, and we're going to run out of time, but I think you probably hit this one relatively succinctly, and that is burnout. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
And that was one that I'd read. I did a little bit of research here. And the interesting thing is burnout in companies, we measure attrition. We measure all kinds of performance angles. Maybe because it's a little nebulous, it's a little subjective. There's not a metric around like burnout. But what do you do about burnout? How do you measure burnout? How do you know when burnout's happening? What do you do to prevent it?
Yeah, so a couple of different questions there. Are there measurements? There are measurements like sick days. There are measurements like engagement in meetings. There's measurement like attendance in meetings. There are indicators of whether or not people are burned out, but the most important one is connecting with human beings and saying, hey, Al, how are you doing really? And then listening. And if you've created an environment of trust, people will say, I'm feeling so burned out. Burnout, as we put in a recent LinkedIn post, often occurs because we have unrealistic expectations about what can be done. So no matter how hard we try, we can't ever get there, and the list is ever longer. So a VP of a public company called me and said, I don't know what to do. Our team are feeling like losers and getting burned out. I said, what's going on? I said, well, we've got this list of 20 things we have to get done. And we're getting some done on all of them, but like only 1 or 2 are getting done. And I said, first of all, let's remember 3 is greater than 7. 3 things are about what we can focus on at one time. So let's pick 3 of the 20 and knock those out and celebrate success and then move on to the others, as opposed to setting unreasonable expectations. Unreasonable expectations of ourselves or our team is what's causing burnout. So I think the first thing is the measure is how people answer the question, how are you doing? And you truly listening as a leader. And if people are honest and you've created an environment of trust, they'll tell you, I'm burned out. And then let's make sure we take time to prioritize what is most important to get done, align on it, get that done, celebrate our success, take a moment to congratulate each other, then go heads down on the next 3 things. But when we feel overwhelmed, like there are 20 things to get done, we start to feel helpless. Burnout requires a feeling of helplessness, in my experience. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, first of all, my thoughts are, hey, I'm the host. I'm just kidding. No, so here's my thought. One is, I think my team would attest to this. As of relatively recently, I've got away from how are you doing? Because almost always, how are you doing? results in what you said earlier, a fine. And yeah, you can branch off that. But what I typically ask now is, what's your energy level? I say, hey, what's your energy level? And a lot of times I'll say, hey, 0 to 5, what's your energy level?
Awesome.
If they say like 3, then what I do is say, okay, you're not a 5. Tell me why you're not a 5. And then you get the gap. And often it's not always business related, as you would expect. It's like, well, I've got something personally going on right now. And I wouldn't have known that had I not asked about that energy level, which could be business related or could be personally related. But then it gives me a better sense and we have a better conversation on that. I had to do that because I was getting too many fines. And then I realized I'm not getting any information out of that question. I might as well just say hello. It didn't matter anymore.
Or you can just follow up and just say, hey, I'm delighted you're doing fine. What are you really experiencing right now? How are you feeling? And another way to ask that question, I learned from a great friend who's a very successful broadcaster said, what are you celebrating right now in your life? In your life, what are you celebrating? We'll give you insight into a person and remind them there are things worth celebrating. And I'm also, we have a story in the book about a Las Vegas restaurant that has a whiteboard, and before every employee shows up at work, well, when they show up to work, they write down on a scale of how they are doing. And if a supervisor sees somebody on a scale of 10 is doing 7 or less, they check in and say, hey, I want to check in. And usually it is personal issues. And you know what? If you're honoring a whole human being, those are important to pay attention to. This idea was introduced to me by the legendary sports manager, Dusty Baker, who said, baseball leader, Dusty Baker said to me, I said, hey, I don't mean to be flippant, but I'm curious to know, what does the general manager of a team do? He says, you know what? I've got this group of amazing professionals. I ask them to go out and give it their best for so many games, more than any other sport. I ask them to give their best every single day. My job is to pay attention. He said, I can't teach them how to be a better pitcher, how to be a better fielder. We've hired them because they're really great at what they do. However, a sick parent, a sick child, marital problems will get in the way of that performance. So I look for how the organization can support those kinds of issues. And so as you say to personal, your job is not to be the savant of personal solutions, but if you can validate and empathize with them and ask, is there any way I can be a resource? It'll go a long way to allowing people to focus on the work to be done, knowing they're an environment of trust and they're cared for as a human being.
I think those are all good. I mean, but to finish, at least part of your question to me on churn, I agree it's the energy level. That's why I started there, is the energy. I think you're all right in your answer, particularly 6 days and that kind of stuff. But I do find a lot of people won't take 6 days, good or bad. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I look for other things like churn. If I see they're churning on something, which leads to stress, if you can't make a decision or something, it's like the motors in your head are spinning. You can see the smoke coming up. And if I can see that smoke, I say something's going on. You also see like a change of behavior, like somebody that's usually on top of things, flipping a little bit. What's going on there? And then also engagement. They're engaged in meetings. They're usually one to talk. Then all of a sudden they go quiet. Typically something's up. Those are the areas. But it does start, I think, with the energy level.
And, we in the book, we identify the 8 signs of lack of engagement, lack of buy-in. For example, we're paying people appropriate money and they keep leaving, or meetings start late or whatever. And what we encourage leaders to do, get your team to complete that survey, that assessment, and then compare answers. If you do it as leader solo, you're already behind the game, because your experience is your experience. It's important, but it's not the experience. It's your experience. It's your truth. So get your team together, take the dang assessment, and have a discussion about what people agree are the most important and pressing issues to address. And 3 is greater than 7. Start with 1 or 2 and talk about ways you can implement it using the drama-free problem-solving system in the book, and then implement it to start to make change. Because otherwise, if we just say, yeah, we're missing deadlines, yeah, people are burnt out, yeah, people are showing up late, yeah. What do we do about it? You can either say, people, let me remind you, we start here at 8:30 a.m. and lunch is from 12 to 1. And that's great. If you're not addressing the underlying issues, you're not going to change behavior, and just to make people say, what a blowhard.
Totally. All right. I got the one last question before the next. And that is, look, I'm in the business of tech, and I'm also in the business of AI. You said people are using AI wrong.
Yeah.
How are they using AI wrong? You got to tell me that piece. I can't let you go before you do.
Yeah, and this may not be true for people in tech. I don't know because I don't know everybody. But what I hear a lot is people use AI like it's a Google search engine. AI, as we see ChatGPT, as you all know, a large language model is only a predictor of the next word. And what we do is we shortchange it and we make a lot of assumptions about what AI can and can't do. AI has no sense of emotion or values. And so when we ask it for an answer, we need to give it our values and give it the criteria that are really important. So feed it all the criteria and the emotional input before we ask it for an answer. So one is critical input. Average AI input that works about 400 words is what I've been told, as opposed to a search on Google, which is about 7 words. Second is then assess the output to ask, does that make sense? Another way, instead of asking AI to solve your problems, share all your criteria, what problem you're trying to address, what your thoughts are on what a great solution looks like, and ask for a second opinion. What am I missing here? What are the alternatives I might also have considered, given my criteria, given our company's values, given what's important to me? That's not a Google search.
I'd like to debate on just on the prompt and stuff, but I'm going to put that aside. This has been fantastic. I would encourage everybody to get your book when it's released. It's coming in the coming month, The Buy-In Advantage. Fantastic. Where can folks reach you?
Yeah, GarrisonGrowth.com, Garrison, GROWTH.com, or go to buyinbook.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Dave Garrison.
Fantastic. What's your energy level, Dave? It feels like it's like if I'm going 0 to 5, you're like at a 5 right now. But you never want to assume. But I'm hurrying, so you shouldn't even give somebody a number before they can answer. But what is your answer?
My answer is I'm absolutely a 5, and I will tell you there are days like earlier this week. I left home at 4 a.m. Sunday morning in order to work on the East Coast and attend a dinner, I'm on the West Coast, so it's 3 hours different. And starting work at 4 a.m. in the morning is not my natural state, or working in Europe, or working in Asia. But you make it happen. You generate your own energy. So I have a choice. And if I feel my energy going down, it's up to me to get outside, walk around, do something different and say, Al, you know what? I can't focus right now. I need to take a little break here. I'll be back.
You're awesome. Thank you very much for being here. That was great. I loved it. I'm reading the book for sure. I'm ready for it.
All right. Let's go. Let's generate some buy-in.
All right. So we just talked with Dave Garrison, all things culture. He's got a new book out, Buy-In Advantage. We talked about a ton of things like engagement, disengagement, burnout. I wanted to invite my favorite coach is Katherine, Mayne. I wanted to get your take real quick. You listen to the podcast. What do you think? What was your first thoughts on this?
I mean, Dave was spot on in so many ways. When you think about the buy-in advantage, and he had some really good data points around it, around when employees are engaged, companies are more profitable, right? So there's a clear line of sight between when we have engaged humans and when people aren't engaged. So I really loved that whole messaging. I loved the creating a safe space. I loved recognizing the human and being curious. I thought those were all great points, and the discussion around AMP. I think the lens that also is interesting to think about when we think about having these conversations and how do we get our teams there is really about timing. Timing is everything of when you have these conversations and when you have coaching and how you build that trust. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, and it takes being intentional about it. So I think thinking about how we have the lens of timing and being intentional on building this kind of cultural bond between leaders and teams. One thing that I was thinking as he was talking about bringing your whole human to work and being authentic is that my coach talks about how you want to be authentic, but nobody wants an authentic jerk at work, right? So there is a degree of authenticity that I think is important to be mindful of. We don't want people who are mean, condescending, undermine the values of the team, undermine the culture. We don't need that energy at work, and we don't need that energy on the team. So I think authenticity is absolutely something that has to be at the table. But I don't think that the header of authenticity gives people free rein to behave however they want and say, oh, I'm just being authentic. There's still some cultural norms. Those team agreements have to be established in order for us to create the vulnerability. So overall, I mean, Dave was spot on with what he said, what you talked about, the autonomy, mastery, purpose. I think that was really helpful. And I would just add that timing is everything, being deliberate, being intentional about building this culture. And authenticity is not a pass to behave however you want.
If there was one thing that you'll change as a result of listening to this, is there one thing? Like one thing, hey, I'm going to take this away and I'm going to do this differently.
I'm going to recommit myself to building relationship first. It is a core value of mine that it is people doing business. And so you got to honor the people in order to get great business results. And when I feel the pressure as a leader, I notice that I slip on that. So listening to that podcast today is going to encourage me to recommit to making sure that however it looks like for people, Dave touched on it a little bit, that some people are overnight thinkers. They need time to process. Some people will give you a response right in the moment. But whatever connection looks like for that human, because it doesn't look the same for all people. I think not everybody wants to be asked how they're doing. Some people can feel very pressured by being asked, what's your energy level today, right? That doesn't sound inviting.
Oh boy.
Pressure. So I think.
So do I need to take that back?
No, because for 90% of the people, it's fine. I think it's just a leader's job to find out if it doesn't land and it doesn't resonate the first couple of times, then maybe course correct your approach, right? That's all I'm saying. And he was alluding to that too, of course correcting how you engage with people as a leader. So I think recommitting to that for me, if I were a leader who was maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum and think that only the outcomes matter, I would take this as an opportunity to reconsider that you are hired for aptitude and fired for attitude. Teams don't work when attitudes don't work, when attitudes are poor. So if you don't be intentional about making the connection to your team and the people actually doing the work, it doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be belabored. But if you don't be intentional about doing that, you're missing an opportunity to deliver an outcome. So even if you personally don't want to be asked as a leader, how are you doing today? You just want to be asked, what did you do to drive the numbers, and a really hard line about it. You do yourself a disservice because not everybody is like you. And the majority of people at least want to be asked how their energy level is today, how they're doing today.
Here's what I heard. Recognize human beings, there's a lot of sound bites, by the way. Recognize human beings, not human doings. Mm-hmm. Environment of trust. Leaders need to be vulnerable. Leaders ask, managers tell. Managers tell. Find what great looks like to make sure there's alignment. Then ask, what is your performance against what has already been outlined is what great looks like collectively. Energy level. We talked a little bit about that already. All of us are smarter than any of us. Slow down to speed up. Progress, not perfection. If you're pressed for time, go to votes without the debate. Money is a myth. Get alignment on values. Make sure everybody's voice is heard. Hire for aptitude. Fire for attitude. I just heard that from you. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The last thing, what I would do differently is I've got to practice a little bit what I preach. I think we got to slow down sometimes and make sure that we recognize that people are watching and they would like to learn. And if we take the time to share our learnings, we can bring the whole organization up faster. Anyway, thank you for sharing your insight. You're the best, Katherine. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Martin. And I think you are absolutely right when it comes to slowing down to share the benefit. Rising seas raise all boats. That really is a real thing. I am going to take one more minute, even though this feels like, and I know podcast listeners are going to be like, oh, he's winding it up and she's going to left turn. I just want to quickly on the key accountabilities, because the assumption and success really predicated on that shared list of key accountabilities. And that is very difficult for leaders and teams to agree upon. What does good look like? And depending on the level of experience and seniority, that's when you get into the how. But if you don't have that key accountability alignment and agreement, it's so easy to go sideways. And then it's so easy to take it very personally, because you can say, I did a great job. This is what you wanted. But if there was no conversation about what good looks like, if there was no line of sight from mission, vision, values to the projects and what good looks like in those projects and how it translates to your role, it makes it very likely to have upset on both sides because energy and time was spent. So also the slowing down to make sure that we're both clear on what good key accountabilities look like. You can figure out how to get there. That's the autonomy part, but let's be really clear on what those key accountabilities are and not let too much time to go by before we checkpoint on those. That was a thread throughout what he was weaving together that I thought was really good. Now we can
wrap. All right.
Wrap it up. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. I love talking about leadership, so it's all good. I don't know why it's so hard, but leadership, it's dealing with the humans, as we've talked about. So thank you. I appreciate you joining me. Talk to you all later.
Right. Thanks, Al. Always a pleasure. All right. Goodbye.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. And look, we listen. Rate us where you are. We'll talk to you next week. Until then, see you on the podcast. Bye-bye.